right. Lane One Talk Show, episode 11. Going into the double digits here, Mark. How we doing?
We doing good, man. Shout out my boy Eric Francis. Gave me the shout out on Instagram. Said we're in the top percentile of podcast, top 10 percentile of podcasts, because I guess not 90% of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. So
I like
shout out for that ESPN stat. I didn't vet it. I didn't fact check it. I'm just holding them to that.
I'm just gonna believe that one blindly. I think that's accurate. I think there's something to be said about consistency, right?
Yeah, and like we said last time, this is probably what 20 something weeks in the work, maybe like 24 weeks of trying to commit ourselves to finding some time after work and training. But with that being said, man, how are things going with you?
Good. You know, last episode, if you want to hear the big update, you know, we talked a lot about the Hall of Fame. We talked about a lot about the Big West Championship, me being a commentator. But since then, not much. I'm getting back. The hamstring is rehabbing. That's feeling good. Running again, doing a lot of strength in the gym every day, cross training, strength, stretching, rehab sort of stuff. Working T-ball has been a big deal.
Yeah, how's Calvin doing? Is he hitting dingers yet?
He's hitting dingers. He's had a lot of a lot of his games got rained out, so we've had a lot of makeup games, like middle of the week makeup games.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have picture day tomorrow, and then a game right after that. So we're deep into springtime here.
Yeah, that's good to hear, man. Still recovering from that marathon, looking to get back to it.
Yeah, looking to get back to it. You know, setbacks are part of the process. I think there's probably some untold damage that was done, you know, when you run a 26-mile race off 30 miles a week. So
yeah, I guess that's fair.
But you know, it's part of the process. Getting older. I'm not 23 years old anymore, so I can't just roll out of bed and go hammer 12 miles like I used to. But yeah. You know, I got a good routine going. I got a good rehab program. I know what I need to do every day, which is encouraging. Plus, I did this in December and January.
Yeah, is it the same hamstring or is it the other one?
It's the same one. It's the same part of the body.
Damn, bro. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's coming along. No pain. I ran today.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you're gonna be ready for the pede, man. We're gonna need you.
Yes, I will be ready.
I'm terrified you might pull up in the middle, man. What are we gonna do?
I know. We're don't think for 1 second that isn't at the front of my thought process here.
Yeah, well, Christopher has bailed on us, man. So I don't know who our floaters are gonna be.
Yeah. Well, I hope to not have to eject.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm doing something every day to get better.
Yeah, dude, we have a pretty killer team this year. So for context, we have the Beta Breaker Centipede coming up in about a month or maybe about 3 weeks. I believe it's like
May 19th.
May 19th?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have that coming up in about 3 weeks. And essentially, we'll have an episode about kind of explaining what it is. But just for context, it's 13 guys bungee cabled to each other. And we run through 7 miles through Golden Gate Park. And normally we average around 5:10 pace. Lately, it's taken like 5:07s, 5:05 to win it. Strong PDC team, but yeah, we have that coming up in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's an iconic. The race Beta Breakers is an iconic race through San Francisco, and the Aggie Centipede is also iconic. You know, our coach Joe Rubio used to do it back in the day, and they used to tie bed sheets around their necks instead of like waist-mounted bungee cords. They tied bed sheets around their neck and flew through the city that way. But yeah, it's a rite of passage. It's like Mardi Gras meets the Boston Marathon. It's great event.
I'm not that huge of a fan of it, but honestly, I only do it because it's kind of like a big reunion for our team. But to be totally honest, I think the reason why is because of that damn walk to the Panhandle everybody likes to do afterwards. When's the last time you've done the walk to the Panhandle, Phil?
It's been about 5 or 6 years. I haven't done it in a while. I did it. I did it for 10 years plus. You know, I've done it. But, you know, I did it for a while and now I'm, you know, I don't need to do it anymore. Or maybe I'll revisit it.
Yeah, you paid your dues. You paid your dues. But I do like Hobo Camp. Hobo Camp afterwards is a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
For
Yeah, but
me, for me, it's a holiday. It's up there with like the beta, not it's up there with Beta Breakers because it is Beta Breakers, but it's up there with Club Nats, PAs, RIP, Silicon Valley Turkey Trot. It's a Phil holiday. It's one of my favorite events of the year when it comes to running.
damn. All right.
Yeah.
So did Silicon die after 2020? After 2020?
Yep.
Damn, they used to be a staple, man.
Yeah, that was a stay. I did that for 10 years. I did that 10 years straight, 2008 to 2018.
Yeah, do you have family up there, or how did you justify that trip every year for Thanksgiving?
Well, my wife has family.
Oh, okay. So
My wife has family. My sister lives up there now. But yeah, before I met my wife for the first couple of years, how did I justify? Oh, I was single, so I would just do the race and I would drive like all the way down to like my family's Thanksgiving in Goleta.
jeez,
So
man. That's such a journey.
that was a journey, but yeah, so those are some long drives. Or I might have even been working at Smart and Final at the time, where I think maybe one year I like had Thanksgiving at my buddy from Smart and Final's place.
Oh wow.
But yeah. So we'll talk. When we get to the fall, we'll talk more about the Silicon Valley Turkey Trot. But yes, the Beta Breakers for me has always been a bulletin board event.
Yeah, I always end up having fun. I feel like we always crap on it, but like we always end up having a lot of fun at that event.
Yeah,
I
man.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to go too deep into it just because we're probably going to spend like a pretty good episode on it. But yeah, outside of Beta Breakers, I also have Oxy Invite coming up next weekend here. So we're recording on what is today, Friday the 26th.
Yeah. What event are you doing? An Oxy Invite?
I'm going to do a 1500.
Nice.
So I haven't done a 1500 this late in the season ever in my life. So, or actually I did back in 2018. I ran a 1500 at Oxy Invite and I ran a PB, which at the time was 353. And yeah, so what is really exciting for me about that is I'm never really in like that good shape when I'm running 1500s. So this time around, being in, pretty good form, hitting some of those harder workouts, it's going to be incredibly exciting to see if I can actually run a respectable time in the 1500 and try to get that down.
Do you know what kind of heat you're in yet?
Nah, or I just honestly haven't checked if those are out yet. I think the deadline is like April 30th, so I'm assuming they're not going to release.
Yeah, I think that's good. So like that's going to be next weekend, like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think the 4th,
The 4th?
is that Saturday. Yeah, me and Silas will probably be in the same heat. If not, he'll be in the A heat. I'll be in the B heat. Honestly, I just want to have a good day.
Yeah,
a good day for me would be running a PB. Or, pretty dang close. I've run 350 like 2 times this year. So maybe like 347, 346 would be a great day. Anything faster than that will be like knocking it out the park.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how far after that is your next race?
I'm entered in the Sound Running Track Fest the next week. So I have like 6 days in between the 1500 and the 5K there. Hoping to get a good PB this week. I did 6x800 workout starting at 210. And then from there, we instantly went down to 207, 208, 208, 207, and then like a 205 last one. And with how comfortable those last 3 reps felt at 207, 207, 205, and how good I felt executing that, I'm pretty excited to see where my fitness is coming around to, especially getting one more 1500 in my legs before that 5K. So I definitely would like to say I'm in the best shape of my life right now.
Nice. And how much recovery on those?
400 jogs. So we were taking about like 2.5 minutes.
Nice. That's solid. So like you're getting into that, you're getting into that special form.
Yeah.
Like when you come through, you're running whatever, 205, 206, but you're coming through and you're like accidentally running like 31 point, right? Through 31, 32 point through the 200, right?
Yeah, we're coming through like 32 pretty consistently. Those 207s, yeah, is when we got down. You'd come through like 31 and then clip off 32s cleanly from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice to be in that kind of shape because it's like you're not feeling too taxed, right? You're you're not gassed. You almost like feel like you have to slam on the brakes a little bit at some points, right? So I think that, yeah, that's the stars are aligning, and you know, back in my day, that's very similar to what I would do. I would do Mount Sac, the Mount Sac Invitational, before Brian Clay existed, and then I would do Peyton Jordan. So I do like 15, and I used to get in like the Thursday afternoon, like morning heats.
Yeah.
Right. Like there used to be like the open, right? Mount Sac, there's a bunch of, there's like the Olympic development collegiate, right? The invite, and then there's the open.
Yeah.
I would run in, I was like just open day heat, and I would just get buried. Sometimes I think one year I won around like 346, 347. We usually top 5 in just a massive college heat. One year I got outkicked by Kadivus Robinson.
That's a name, bro. That I don't know if our listeners will know who Kadivus Robinson is.
Robinson. When was his last Olympics? 08, maybe?
08, yeah.
12?
I was in the 8th grade.
Yeah. Yeah, 1 year. So that's that. Back in those days when you didn't have sound running, you didn't have Brian Clay, you didn't have you know, the meet in San Francisco, Finelli. You didn't have Finelli back in the day. You, like, everybody, including the Olympians, went to Mount Sac, right? Allison Felix, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you would be, you know, if you were doing a 1500, you might get, you know, a David Kermanacker or Kadivus Robinson in there. So yeah, so I would do very similar schedule to what you're doing. Then Peyton Jordan, back when Peyton Jordan would let in post collegiates that weren't like full Nike pros.
Yeah. No, I wanted to do Peyton Jordan. Joe shut that one down, though. I wanted to do a 5K there and then a 5K at the Track Fest, and he was like, "No, you're slow right now. You need a 1500."
Yeah.
He's like, "You need a 1500. Choose the 15 instead of the 5." I was like, "But Peyton Jordan's gonna be fast." He was like, "Do the 1500, man. Save the 5 for later." So I was like,
"Yeah,
all right, sounds good."
Yeah, no, there with the Track Fest, and there's so many good meets now. Sound, you know, like there's, you know, Brian Clay. You know, there's so much going on now, but like, you know, yeah, back in the Peyton Jordan days, we had some good times. Yeah.
Scott Bowes was in the 10K heat where Selinsky broke 27 for the first time.
Yep, set the American record.
Yeah, set the American record. Can you imagine getting overlapped running 28:04? Like, I would kill to run a 28:04, and he got lapped.
Yeah, you just that's just like, it's the, if there's anything I've learned about this year watching your race and then the sound running 10K is the 10K is a time warp, man.
Yeah.
You know, because you could be 250 meters behind and still on just an absolute, you know, PR mode. Like, so, I mean, thinking about it, like, yes, overlapping someone and still running 28:04 it is nuts. But if you think about it, what is Selinsky running? 66s, 65s,
65s. Yeah.
So
probably.
Yeah. So Scott was only 65 seconds behind him. It just happened to be 405 meters.
Yeah, exactly. But no, what you brought in mind there when you said you're talking about the 10. So the year Grant Fisher won it in 26:33, I thought something was pretty crazy to watch. So his main competitor at like the national meet was John Dressel, and they had a big epic sprint to the finish at Foot Locker where they even made contact and Grant like got him at the kick. And I found it pretty damn crazy that they were showing it. Grant is overlapping John Dressel on his way to get the American record. But what was crazier about that is John Dressel still ran like a 25-second PB and ran like 27:53. But he's over here getting lapped by someone running 26:33, and both times are equally not equally, but both times are pretty damn impressive. And the guy was getting overlapped by a decent margin.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's a the 10K. I mean, it kind of goes back to what you were saying a couple episodes about, like, you know, women's 10K times, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's so many good times in a 10K at different levels too, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, you think about maybe even like a community college time. Those guys are running sub 32, right? Like
probably sub 31. Some of them will get under 30.
Okay, but yeah, some of you will get under 30. But that's a good time, right?
Yeah.
you know, and that's a good time for them, you know, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, first couple
Yeah.
years, you know, so like, so you're, you know, you're running 30 at the community college level. That's really solid, all the way to Grant Fisher, 26:34.
Yeah, that's what Silas was telling me after I ran the 10K. He's like, 29:05 is still a really good time. He's like, even
Yeah.
if you ran like 28:20, he's like, keep in mind, like, still not that good compared to like,
Right.
and he's like, so it's all relative. He's like, so he's like, a guy like that runs 28:20. He's having an existential crisis, wondering if he should still continue. He's like, you running 28:20, you would be like, wow, I'm like, I'm amazing. And I was like, yeah, that's a fair comparison, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. The 10Ks, the 10K is strange that way, because it's not like the 5K. It's kind of like you got the 14-minute barometer, right?
Yeah. Nowadays, shoot, it's 13:30.
Yeah. But still, like, if you break 14 minutes, it's still under 14 minutes.
Yeah, I think there's just not enough people, not enough Americans under 13 for 13 to be that barrier yet.
No, it's not. It's not quite there yet. But it's like, it's still like, even like 13:30 being the new 14 minutes is still like, you know, 30 to 45 seconds, you know, like you're not like 500 meters ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying.
But yeah, that's that. You got some good racing coming up, man. That's going to be exciting to follow. I like, you know, this time of year is always, you know, it's, you know, there's fads that come and go, but like you know, your 15 that spikes the fitness for the 5K the next week or the week after is a go-to move.
Yeah, man. I haven't heard a lot about fads lately. I haven't heard double threshold being tossed around lately. I haven't heard people talking about special blocks lately. I haven't heard a lot of that. I feel like people kind of got over the fads a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I mean, it's, to be honest, it's hard to keep up with the fads. You know, it seems like, you know, having been through a few cycles here, it all seems to go towards a similar place. You know, it all seems to, it's a different way of packaging a similar thing. You know, like how I think we might have talked about it on in a podcast, or maybe it was on a long run, but like Cooper Tier and Cole Hawker, how they do like a midweek long run like the day before, and then like less than 24 hours later do a tempo or something like that.
Yeah,
and it's that's their version of a double threshold.
Yeah, I feel like the fad that I hear tossed around right now is people, you know, referencing LT1 and LT2. People trying to be like, well, like trying to differentiate it like that. Like, oh no, that's not that's an aerobic power workout, not a VO2
Yeah,
max.
I've been seeing a lot of that, especially on accounts that are like more citizen runner based, more like
bloggers.
Yeah, like you know what I mean, for people getting the BQs. Like I see more of that. Huh?
I said shout out Matt Choi.
So yeah, people who are coaches of people who are going after the BQs, stuff like that. I'm seeing LT1, LT2, Zone 2, Zone 3. What's the zone that people spend not enough time in or too much time in? Is it Zone 2? Too much?
Yeah, people don't spend enough time in Zone 2.
People don't spend enough time in Zone 2. I've been seeing a lot of that for the citizen runner crowd.
Yeah, literally that's just running.
Just running.
Heart rate between 135 to like 145 or 150. And it's like, oh yeah, Zone 2. Like, did you know you make benefits if you run at this effort? Like, whoever told you to run easy, that's just not true. I'm like, oh God, like, bro, y'all. And then y'all look at your Strava and it's like you're in the 160s, 170s calling it Zone 2.
Yeah. It's they're just literally threshold on the warm up, right? Like,
yeah, seated tempos.
Seated tempos.
Yeah, when I heard you drop that, dude, I was dying, bro.
No, the way that started was, you know, I had a meeting for work that I was a little stressed out about, and I checked my watch afterwards, and it wasn't like super high heart rate, but it was definitely elevated. Right. And I took a screenshot and I sent it to Blake, and then we were like, dude, seated thresholds. And he has the same thing. He's like, oh, I have a seated threshold meeting this afternoon. I can't make it. Like,
Yeah, dude. I was dying because I was in the sauna the other day and I like wearing my watch in there. And in the sauna, my heart rate got up to like 132. And I was like, and Scott was in the session after me. I was like, yo, Scott, like, if my heart rate gets to 130, does that count as like cardiovascular training? He's like, nah, there's no output. He's like, but I see where you're going with it. But I'm like, yeah. So I started thinking about it. I was like, is that a seated tempo?
Yeah,
Like,
it
if I
is.
got my heart rate up to like 150 sitting inside a sauna, I mean, I'd probably be dying at that point. But like,
Yeah.
it was like 131, and I was like, that's higher than on my easy days.
But how, like, it's pretty uncomfortable with your heart rate seated at 130,
Oh yeah.
135, right?
Oh yeah.
Right?
If I get to 130, like that means I need to step out like now.
Yeah. It's so weird. Like running, you feel like your effort matches where your heart rate is, right? So
Yeah.
you might be putting out, a hard, 165, threshold or whatever, but you feel like you're moving through that, you're putting that effort in. But like when I'm on the bike or if I'm in a like meeting or I'm on, sauna or something like that, like anything above like 130 just feels uncomfortable. Like I'm on the cardio machines just like going nuts and it's just my heart rate
Yeah.
doesn't get that high.
That probably has to do more so with our like development, like our muscular development. Like you look at a lot of citizen runners, as you're saying, like their heart rates get to 170, 180 off of like 3 minutes on, 1 minute walk.
Yeah.
Like they're just not that muscularly developed in the sense of using the right muscles to be efficient. And like you have 20 years in your body using these same exact muscles. And
No,
I
yeah.
think the same goes for cyclists. So I was talking to Davis about this. He runs for Poly, but he trains like a triathlete. And he was saying, he's like, oh yeah, at first your quads are going to be on fire on the bike. He's like, but once you get like strong enough on the bike, like you don't even feel it anymore. He's like, it's just repetitions.
Yeah, that makes sense. You get more efficient, right? You get more efficient with your, because there's, when you're learning a new skill, it's going to like the basics are going to cause you to become more fatigued, like swimming, right? Swimming's another great example.
I'm horrible at swimming.
I'm maybe terrible swimmer.
I think I'm like 152 per like 100 meters or per 2 lengths of the pool, whatever
and
it is.
And it feels awful, right?
Oh yeah, dude. I feel like I'm dying and I'm breathing so hard. And I look and it's like heart rate 131. I'm like, no way, man. This is like 180 for me. Has to be.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into our topic for today?
Yeah, let's get into the topic a little bit.
So, as we talked about in the last episode, we were going to talk about self-sabotage, but we were getting a little long. We wanted to give enough attention to all the other things that we were talking about. But this time we are going to talk about self-sabotage in terms of running. And there is some lessons that I think can be applied to other aspects of life, but we're going to stay in our lane one, and on the focus on running. So, Mark, when we're talking about self-sabotage in terms of running, how do you define it?
How I would define self-sabotage is setting yourself up for failure, whether you're aware of it or not. And a lot of times, what I mean by that is something I always try to get across to people that I'm either talking to about training or talking to about being competitive. Number one is learning how to develop a competitive mindset and learn that we don't train because training is the funnest thing in the world. We train so that we can compete at the highest level that we possibly could, because our day-to-day is essentially, it's pretty dang grueling, especially if you're a post-collegiate athlete where you're working full-time, you have a family, you have chores to do, you have other responsibilities, and running is almost a glorified hobby, or it essentially is a glorified hobby, something that we put a lot of hours to. It's a hobby that we're better at than most people are at their hobbies. And the thing about it is we train and we do this every single day so that we can have the best possible results come race day. And I feel like something that I see very common is people setting themselves up for failure rather than success heading into races. And when you do start racing post-collegiately, something that becomes more and more noticeable is you race a lot less frequent. So when you do get those opportunities to line up, I feel like you need to do everything you possibly could to take advantage. And remember, like, you are training to race. You're not training just for your health, because what we do is not healthy. Like, you see us regularly talking about getting injured. You see us regularly talking about all the sacrifices we have to make. a lot of it, like I weigh freaking 135 pounds, bro. Like I'm a stick. Like it's not healthy what we do. So and all of this is to set yourself up to have the best possible day come race day.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a good point. When post collegiately, we race a lot less. So in high school, you're racing a lot, right? In track and field, you're racing twice a week. You're usually doing, Wednesday, Thursday dual meet and Saturday invitational. And cross country, you're racing every week or every other week at least. And in college, it's less than that, right? You're not having the midweek dual meets. You're typically racing every other week or every 3 weeks, once a month, depending on what your goals are. If you're doing a 10K, 5K, 10K, you might only get in like 4 invites before conference, 3 invites, something like that. Depending, if you're middle distance, you can probably do some more, but you race even less. And then when you get post collegiate, it's even less than that, right? You're very targeted with what you do. And from the blue collar standpoint, you might not have enough, time to go to a race, whether that's taking time away from work or taking time away from your family. And then, the full-time pros, they're very surgical with when they lace it up, right? Everything has a purpose. So it's even, less the farther you kind of go up in levels.
Think about it. Once you move to the marathon too, you race maybe 2 times in 6 months.
Yeah.
And you do all this training for essentially maybe a half marathon along the way and then a marathon. And then that's it. And then you rinse and repeat. So you get to the point where you start racing maybe 5 times a year max.
Yeah. And that makes the decision-making more important, right? Because when when you race more often, you have more of that feedback. You're like, oh, okay, I didn't race well at the 3,200 at this invitational. I need to clean things up by next week so I can get it together. Like, so your workouts become more indicators than your races do, or more frequent indicators than your races do.
Yeah. And again, I feel like there's levels to this in the sense of whether you're doing it consciously, whether you're doing it subconsciously, and the types of decisions that you are making along the way and what you're doing along the way, maybe. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm sorry if anyone listening feels like it hits a little bit close to home, but a lot of situations do apply to, like, a lot of us make the same mistakes once it comes to hitting race day. And something like, for example, let's kick things off. Like, let's start with what we have listed here, training choices. So the most common form of self-sabotage that I think is the most prevalent in athletes, and this could be just my opinion. I know there's always coaches that have, like, in the grand scheme of things, we're peaking for championship season. However, I think the number one that I always see is people that say, I'm training through this race. And the reason I say that is because when you're training through a race, one, you're accepting that you are not going to have a good day. You are already you're giving yourself a cop out that you may potentially have a bad day this weekend, and that's okay. And the reason why I have a problem with that is because you're not going to workouts are made to simulate races. Workouts are made to improve races. But the best way to get better at racing is by competing. So there might be those invitationals here and there. You have a early season 1,500 in March and your goal is in June. Sure, keep your mileage high, or sure, do a normal workout that week, but at least do everything you can to freshen up and still go out there with getting rid of the mindset of, oh, I'm training through this. Because at that point, if you have a bad race, you're already giving yourself an excuse why it's going bad, or you're giving yourself an excuse not to execute.
And if you in that example of maybe an early March, February, even like a late February, everything has a time and a place, right? So if you are kind of like quote unquote training through, maybe the training at that time of year isn't super event specific, right? So maybe you're not like shredding 8 times 800 at 205, right? Maybe it is a little bit more moderate, so that, okay, you do that Tuesday afternoon, so Saturday you have some time to recover, right? So you do something more moderate. Maybe it's like more like threshold 400s or something like that. So but a higher volume of 400s or thousands or something like that, where it's not as taxing and event specific, so that you can freshen up by the end. Versus what I think you're probably talking about is like 2 or 3 days before your race, hitting something super intense, not taking it that easy the day before, and then trying to go out and race.
Yeah, what would kill me is when I would see people run like 10 miles the day before a race, or people that are hitting like these crazy doubles the day before the race. And I'm just like, why? Like,
Yeah.
why are you lining up then? You might as well just go do a hard workout if that's like the kind of position you're going to put yourself in.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's yeah, go do a workout, or maybe hit a road race or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, hit a 5K or a 10K on the road, a 10 miler or something like that. Get a make your tempo like a race or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, the B heat of the 15 at Brian Clay. Like it could be something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like with that point, do you have any other examples of in training when you feel like people self-sabotage themselves?
I'll use my most recent example. When I tweaked my hamstring this last time, I'm usually pretty good about knowing when to change the workout, right? Like when to
Yeah.
go 5 minutes on, 1 minute off versus a tempo. But like for some reason, I had it in my head that weekend I was going to do 2 times 3 mile, and I was in Ventura that time, so I used the bike path. I love that bike path. It's really easy to get on, and so I think what ended up happening is all the driving the night before, and I didn't get much sleep with the late night and everything. And I probably should have like augmented that to be more of maybe a progression run, or maybe for like minute on, minute off, or 5 minutes on, off. But like I brought my super shoes. I was like in the zone. I was like, I made it part of the weekend, right? It was like, you know, it was like, okay, I'm gonna get this work, because everything had been going well until that point. Like the week before, I did 5 miles worth of quality. And so I was like adding 1 mile to my weekend tempo each week. I was going like 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles. So this was like 6 miles. And what I think was like, I was feeling good, but I think just with everything going on, I probably should have gone a little bit more moderate than even that. And, you know, maybe knowing myself, knowing where I am training wise, knowing my age, I probably could have done like 5 minutes on, 1 minute off, times 6 or times 8 or something like that. So a little bit of self-sabotage there, a little bit of bad luck too, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, hindsight's 2020 though, right? With that kind of stuff. But
Yeah, exactly.
I just thought of that while I was telling that story. This one time, you've heard me mention the name Dan Gonya, right?
I know Dan Gonya.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So he Cal Poly guy, Mesa, San Diego Mesa transfer, and Aggie, and you know him and I, we lived together, right? I think we lived together 1 year. I've had so many roommates, but yes, we did a tempo out at Cuesta. We did the classic 2 times 4 mile, and the first one we did was well under 21 minutes. It was like 20, 30, 20, 40. And that one's usually supposed to be like 21 something, right? 21:20 for the first one. So we cranked that one, 5-minute jog or whatever, and then we run like 19:27 on the second one. And this is in A6 hyperspeed sit 2s, 6s, something like that. Hyperspeeds, you know, this is not in super shoes. This is back when like sub 20 was really good back then. So we ran, and so we just cranked it. And this was like a February workout, and like I felt pretty good that day, but I woke up injured the next day. Like I could not even do a long run. And I'm like, well, so I had to take like 2 weeks off, right? Because I wanted to go race Dan Gonya around Demo Man. And this was like, that's gotta be 10 years ago, maybe. But yeah, there was that was definitely a self-sabotage, because I did not put myself in a position to succeed there, right? I put myself in a deficit where now I'm having to like recover from this race effort in practice, so I can't race.
Yeah, no, I get that. And even piggybacking off of that, I have my own personal stories like that where, like, for example, one, not hitting your own paces in workouts.
Mm-hmm.
I went through a phase where I was a Strava fiend, where it was like I noticed the workouts or the runs that got the most kudos for me were the tempos. And I loved it. This was maybe back in like 2019, 2020. So I would see that if I did, 14 miles at like 5:35 pace, or I think I had like 5:39 pace for 14 miles, or I had like 8 miles at sub 5, like stuff like that. I was running these ridiculous workouts.
8 miles at sub 5?
Yeah, that's my PB to this day in 2020. I think I did 8 miles at like 4:58 average.
Well, you've beaten that in a half.
Well, yeah, but I mean for a tempo. Like that is the hardest I've gone in a workout ever, and I was legitimately racing that. But it's like you look at what the concept of tempos are, you look at what the purpose of them are,
right?
You look at how you're supposed to execute them. And I know this stuff. Like I talk about this stuff all the time. I research this stuff all the time.
Right.
But still in my head, my ego was too big to slow it down. So I went out, I ran like the first mile and like, I think I clipped off like a 5:04 and I was like, oh, well, I'm supposed to get faster from here. And then you clip off like a 4:57 and you're like, you're getting greedy. You feel yourself going to the well, but you're getting greedy because you want that average to look the same. But like in reality, I probably should have been like, yo, this is not my tempo pace. Like I should be slowing it down.
Yep.
But instead, like ego gets in the way. You wind up running this murderous workout. And the next thing you know, boom, shattered Achilles.
Yep.
Or like next thing you know, boom, injured hamstring. And I think that was my hamstring that year. And it was like, all right, well, you knew what the workout was. Your coach told you 5:20 pace for 8 miles. And you ran like 4:58 pace because you could.
Yep.
And I see people do that with intervals all the time. And that kills me. And that's something I have to get across where I'm like, why not let yourself feel good running? Like, let's say Joe tells me I need to hit 2:16 pace for 8x800. And I'm crushing the last ones. And I'm running like 2:10. My whole thought process is like, why are you running that? Like, because you could? Like, why not hit your pace, get what you need to do done, and then move on feeling good? Go to your next day feeling good. Next day, you probably have a recovery day. Can you imagine the amount of recovery you'll get if you execute the workout feeling good and then go into a recovery day feeling good and then recovering from that?
Right.
So it's like you're giving yourself days and days to recover, to keep stacking up coin, to keep stacking stuff up. But instead, like you let your ego get in the way. So you shattered your legs.
Yep. And I think, maybe the lesson that I think you pointed out there was the paces, right? Running your actual paces. And I'll use an example. A few years ago, we were doing 8 times 400 meters with 200-meter recovery out at Cuesta.
Yeah.
And I think you guys were hitting like 59, 60. And that's 100% of a workout, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're in actual like that shape, right? So 345 shape, that should be 100% of a workout, right?
Yeah.
So like I was just off you guys. I was training for grandmas at the time. So I was running like 63, 64s.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to run 59, 60, that wouldn't be 100% of a workout for me. That would be like 140% of a workout for me. Right.
Yeah.
So
you're damn near 800 pace at that point.
Yeah, I'm at 800 pace. So like I think that's important to know too, because that affects your recovery, right? That affects your recovery, and that might have been a golden mushroom. You might have had to cash in a golden mushroom that day, and I might not have been able to recover the right way. And I think maybe applying that to other runners, I think that's important to know. Like, hey, if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable and you're training with a group that's moving quicker, it may be like better long term for you to run at a little bit even easier pace so you can still cover the distance and feel good at the end versus having to drop out or putting yourself in a well and waking up the next morning injured or sick, right?
Yeah.
And anybody, like, your BQ qualifiers can, you have your Tuesday night road warriors, right? So, I think it's, you always kind of, okay, I want to run with that group. I want to run that group. And sometimes the cards don't fall that way. Sometimes the card, you might catch a supersonic Celis on a big day. And it's just, hey, I'm going to run 502s today and whatever else happens. Like,
yeah, exactly. I'm running a 4:42 second mile.
Yeah.
That was a true story that happened to me, man.
Oh, I've seen it, man. I've seen it. And that's it. We've talked about that at length on this show, but that is the benefit of running with a group is, you have 5 guys who are all kind of pretty much like 65-minute half marathoners or faster. Somebody's going to have a great day on any given day. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's important for people to stay in their paces, but also understand current fitness pace, right? Your current fitness pace is more accurate than your goal pace. Like, I may want to be a 14-minute 5K guy all day, but that's not the current fitness that I'm in. I need to be in whatever fitness that I'm in, right?
Well, that's the beauty of, you see, a lot of like a big question that I always see on the internet, not necessarily directly asked at me, is people's like, well, how do you know your pace is like if you don't have access to like a VO2 max test, or like, how do you know what your threshold pace if you don't have a lactometer, or like, how do I know what paces I should be running for these? It's like, dude, that's the beauty of early season races. You go out, and it was, for example, when I went to BU, I ran a 5K, I ran as hard as I could, and I ran 14:05. And it's like, yeah, I definitely wanted to run faster, but it gave me a baseline for where I'm at to go train correctly.
Yep.
This whole time I thought I was like, 1355 shape, 1350 shape, which is about 66 points. But it's like, no, you ran 14:05. That's about a 67 point. So from there, you scrap what you've been doing, and you are like, okay, I ran a 14:05 5K. That probably indicates that I can run 350 in the 1500, probably indicates that I can run about 29. What is that? Like maybe like a 29:20 in the 10K. My half marathon pace is probably like 65 minutes. So when you go back, you have all these paces that you can work around now, and you can see what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And then I went maybe about 2 months later, and I ran a 1500. I ran 350. Then you run the 10K, you run 29:05. You see where you felt uncomfortable, where the wheels fall off, all that kind of stuff. And you take those early season races and you use those as learnings for current fitness, not goal fitness.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's a great way to go about figuring out your current fitness without having to get a crazy expensive equipment. Do you think I keep using the term citizen runner. If they were like just to go run a 1600 meters at their local high school track for a little time trial, get their, significant other buddy to time them, do you think that would be valuable too?
Oh, 100%. So Tin Man, Tom Schwartz.
Yep.
What he would tell his athletes to get early season baselines. He was a big time trialer guy. I know Tom Schwartz has fallen off the map a little bit in terms of popularity because of his whole falling out with Tin Man Elite, but the guy is still hyper intelligent. But he would tell his athletes to time trial at 97% effort or 95% effort. Because when people run 95% effort, it takes the pressure off because you're not going all out. And you're giving pretty damn near 100% effort. It's kind of like when someone tells you go do strides at 90% effort. Like you're probably going near 100. You're just not pushing that little bit. So he would take that. He would have people do an 800 time trial and like a 3K time trial. And he would take those times and be like, okay, your 3K is far superior than your 800, or like your 800 is far superior than your 3K. That gives you baselines on what you need to work on the most to be more well-rounded. Or it sets you up for paces to be like, okay, right now you can run this time for an 800 and this time for a 3K. That means the rest of your time should be roughly around these areas. So definitely, I think going out and hitting a time trial to see where you're at is never a bad thing.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And because you want to make things, I always go from the standpoint of people having less access to equipment and facilities than having more access, right? Yeah. So because I coached high school forever, and you don't have a ton of stuff at the high school level. So time trial at your, on your local bike path or your local high school track, and even at 800 meters, I think would be super valuable to see where you're at, and then train at those paces accordingly. Go online, look up Jack Daniels, or look up who are some other like Lytton, McMillan has a good chart.
McMillan, Tin Man.
Yep. There, look at They all have one. I would use Jack Daniels for a lot of his paces, but figure out your appropriate paces, and even easy run paces, long run paces, stuff like that.
I
And
wouldn't
adjust.
look at Jack Daniels for easy runs though. I'll warn you there, just because Jack Daniels says I should do all my runs at 6-minute pace.
No, I was about to. I'm glad you brought that up. I was about to. Yeah, I agree. I am not. Yeah, it's like Galen Rupp should be running 5:38 for his easy runs, right?
Yeah, his zone 1. But yeah,
easy runs. You're right.
Yeah, I was gonna say last one I would go into though for training for self-sabotage is training through injuries.
Yeah,
I feel like when you start to feel like a niggle, or you start to feel something grabbing on you, I feel maturity is taking time off. And I didn't learn that until maybe I was about 28 or 27 years old. I'm going to be honest. I always felt like I was Iron Man. Like I would get injured all the time, but like just train through it and be able to tough it out up until I got my first Achilles injury in 2021. After that, I legitimately trained through that, did club cross on a hurt Achilles, and was actively limping.
But you were a hero. You were the hero.
We got money. we got third, and we got paid.
So got paid.
That was pretty nice.
Bro, we were staring down Cole Hawker, bro.
Dude, he might have overlapped me. Nah, it was like a 1K loop. He didn't overlap me. Yeah. But point is, I couldn't walk after that race. I had trained through that Achilles injury up until I physically could not walk. And what killed me about that year was I had already bought my plane ticket to Houston and my hotel room. And with the way our contracts work, we can't get it reimbursed if you don't go. And I learned that because I didn't go. So I had to swallow a plane ticket and a hotel room.
Yeah.
So I threw away, and Houston was the main goal for me that year. I wanted to go run a really fast half. And what killed me was I was doing all my workouts with Silas at the time, and he went on to run 63:15. So me being me, I'm very competitive. I felt I could have been there with him, no problem, just because of where I was at the time.
Yep.
And with what kind of workouts we're doing together. But I had trained through that hurt Achilles so much that I got to the point where I could not walk anymore. And I had to take 4 weeks off because the Achilles just would not calm down, or I kept trying to rush to come back. And I feel like that all could have been avoided because there was one midweek long run where prior to starting, I rolled up and was like, "Ooh, that doesn't feel too good." And I was like, "Nah, you'll be fine. Like, work through it." And then I got out maybe about a mile and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is grabbing up on me." Nah, it's fine. Let's just do it. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I wound up doing like 14 miles at like 6 flat average. The last 7 miles were like 5:30 something. And I finished and my Achilles was just shot. But I kept training on it. I kept doing runs on it. I altered my form. Later down the line, I wound up with a hamstring issue because of how much I compensated on that Achilles. I was up for an entire calendar year, starting from that fall all the way to the next one, because the same Achilles gave this past fall. Or this would have been 2022, not 2021. So literally all the way from fall 2022 to fall 2023, I had the same Achilles issue that I trained through. And it just kept manifesting in my lower back, in my hamstring, back to my Achilles. And it just got to the point where when I got the Achilles issues the second time, the second day that I felt it, I was like, I'm done. Shut it down immediately and was like, we're not going to go through this again. And wound up recovering within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then was able to race club cross 2 weeks later.
Yeah. That cycle, you try to convince yourself, right? You're like, you try to rationalize. You're like, you get out the door mile 1, it feels iffy, but you're like, nah, it's fine. Right. And that's very common, dude. Like I do less of that now just because I'm just like so overly cautious, but so many midweek long runs, like fartleks, intervals. I'm just like, it's fine. You're fine. You're fine. And you roll the dice, right? But yeah, I think that there is a lot of self-sabotaging that happens at the, when it comes to training choices, and they're preventable, right?
Yeah. These are all things that you can prevent. A lot of times what gets in the way is ego or insecurity.
Right. And then the other main type of self-sabotage is lifestyle choices. So these are things that happen. My college coach used to say, in the 22 hours a day that I don't see you. So if practice is usually around 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on what you got going on.
Yeah.
So those decisions that you make when you're not running can have an impact on your running.
Probably even more so, because a lot of people forget running is how you recover from the activity and how your body makes adaptations. It's not from the actual run itself.
Nope. The actual running is the fun part.
Yeah. So I feel like these might be a little more glaring.
Yes.
Like there's the more obvious ones, but the ones that I'm more that we'll get into the more obvious ones, but the ones that I'm more interested about,
the nuanced. Yes.
Yeah. I want you to talk about, like, we'll cover the glaring ones, but I do want you to get into the ones that, like, maybe we don't think about that can be considered self-sabotage. But to kick things off, things like having a terrible sleep routine or eating fast food or binge drinking, a lot of that stuff is setting yourself up absolutely for failure. And a lot of times people will, me ironically having my bottles in the back right there, but a lot of times it's like people are setting themselves up knowing damn well that this is going to affect their performance, and they don't bat an eye. Or if not, they don't understand why they're performing so bad. I remember I was mentioning it in one of the pods, maybe like episode 6 or something like that, where I'm talking about how I was going out 4 nights a week, drinking 3 or 4 AMFs every time I went out. Like I was out dancing. I was getting home at 2 a.m., like completely drunk, going to a work shift the next day and just doing that over and over. And then being like, Joe doesn't know how to coach. Like this is all Joe's fault.
Right.
And in reality, it's like, the lifestyle choices I was making at the time, that was not conducive with performing well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think those are the glaring ones. Those are the obvious sort of things, right? If you're staying up to 3 a.m. playing video games every night, like, that's not going to be conducive to getting up and doing your threshold in the morning, right? And I think maybe something a little bit more, maybe something that people could do to analyze this, because we all want to have a good time, right? Like we people deserve to be able to go and be an adult and have a good time, go to a wedding, it's wedding season, right? And you need to have a good time, and you need to be able to enjoy yourself, travel with your family, things like that. And I think, like, if you are having a little bit of a tough time with your running, you're going through a rough patch, maybe you're battling injury that's just not getting better, or you're constantly fatigued and your runs are just like your heart rate is spiking and on an easy run, or you're running what you think should be, what feels like 5-minute pace, but you look at your watch, it's 6-minute pace when you're trying to do minute on, minute offs or something like that. I think a good strategy would be just like to look at the past 10 days of what you did each day. What was your sleep like? What was your activity level like? What was your stress like at work? Because that meeting that didn't go so well, like 4 days ago, could have spiked your stress response, and that could have, had suppressed your immune system, right? And then, that could have caused you to feel like crap for a few days. So I think, obviously the glaring stuff, right? The going out and partying, staying up all night, that's like, yes, that's going to be obvious. But there, for those, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about the fact that I had to go drive to San Jose to pick up somebody from the airport and drive them home, and I didn't eat well, and I had to, have McDonald's and In-N-Out for 2 days, right? Like little things like that, like I think would be helpful to reflect on. That said, what are some of the more nuanced things that you're thinking about when it comes to the things that we may miss, the decision making that compromises our racing and running?
So some of the subtle things that I've noticed are, like heading into a race, I feel I've seen people try new things or try things that they know in the past have not worked. And that's the kind of stuff drives me crazy, to a sense where it's like, wait, it's like, yeah, I wound up having a lot of stomach problems. Like, I ate Chipotle for my lunch prior to the race, and I always get bubble guts whenever I eat Chipotle. So I think that's what happened. And it's like, then why the hell did you eat Chipotle?
Yeah.
And it was like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of times it's like, I'm also the type of person that learns off a bad experience too. So that's how I know I can't eat like Alfredo before anything, because I get food poisoning from it. And it took me like 3 chances until I realized, holy crap, this stuff gives me food poisoning. Or like I vomit every time I eat this stuff.
Yep.
So like, all right, night before, don't eat that. But I feel like I have friends that, or teammates that would regularly like try something new, or for example, do something different the day before. I had a friend start like the day before meet where we needed a PR. I'm going to do barefoot running and these weightlifting exercises that I saw online that like this pro team was doing. I was like, bro, you didn't never hit the weight room ever. What are you
The
going to
day
do
before?
the day before? Yeah.
Oh man.
So, I know like Brooks Beast does stuff like that. Like the day before, Josh Kerr's doing medicine ball tosses and like crap like that.
Yeah.
But it's like you've never tried anything like that. Same
Yeah.
thing with like people trying, I'm going to do threshold the day before the workout, or I'm going to do threshold the day of. It's like, have you tried that at practice before? Or
Right.
like, have you ever practiced doing that? It's like, no, I'm going to try for this race though. And that's like, yeah, I felt really bad, or I felt flat, or it's like, well, what are you doing, man?
Yeah. No, that's such a, I'm glad you thought of that. That was the marathon expos, right? You've been to Houston.
Yeah.
Huge hallway, like convention center full of every gadget, gizmo, supplement that you've ever heard of, right?
Yeah.
All the booths, right? Massages, chiropractic, all that stuff is in there. Shoes, every shoe, every shoe's going to be in there. And it's like you have to resist the temptation to just completely change your routine. I mean, if they had Martin gels in there for cheap, I'll grab some, sure, because I use Martin gels. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to just 12 hours before my race, oh, I'm just going to try this new gel I've never tried before. I mean, you've seen me out there. I'm trying everything out for 6 months leading up to the marathon. Like I'm vetting everything. Like I go find my yogurts. I go find my coffee. I have everything dialed in, ready to go. But yeah, the new stuff, it just, and I that was in high school too. And there's a learning process in high school. We're educators, we're teachers, we're teaching people how to be. And sometimes having, that egg McMuffin that coach didn't see on the bus on the way to Mount Sac is just the only way that you're going to learn, and it's better to learn that in 9th grade, but yeah, that's a good one. That's a good little nuance.
Yeah, I feel like those are the ones that kind of like slip through. There's also one that you mentioned off the call where people like, they're up. So I had this actually happen to me one.
Oh yes. Yeah.
So it's a lot of these are pretty funny because I'm talking a lot of trash on them, but it's because I've done them before and it kills me to see other people do them. So you brought up the idea of like, doing your homework late at night or staying up late. So my dumbass one time before track nationals, my junior year of college, I had the 5K next day, but I was up till 3 a.m. the night before working on this damn final that I had, because the way we were, that was finals week. And I had a final that I had a full week to do, and I saved it for the night before my race. And I was up till 3 a.m. doing it the night before my race. And the thing on top of that, it's like, okay, sure, if you have one day of sleep like kind of ruined in your pattern, it's not going to make that big of a deal, right? But the thing you're not thinking about is the amount of stress that comes with that. For the reason I was up till 3 was because that assignment was due at midnight Pacific time. And I was working from like 9 p.m. Eastern time till like 3 a.m. Eastern time trying to finish this thing, and I'm stressing because it's not done right. And we had this system. It was like a Microsoft. It was not, I'm forgetting Microsoft Outlook assignment. And I had never used the damn program in my life.
Oh, so you didn't know how to upload it?
No. Well, you upload it and it'll tell you what percentage it's correct. And it needed to be 100%.
Oh, man.
So I kept uploading and it was like 83. Then it dropped to 73 because I changed something. All right, 87. And so you're just like, crap. And you're seeing the time and it's ticking down and you're stressed. And then you go to sleep and you are not getting the best quality sleep and your rhythm is so thrown off by the time you wake up, even if you get like 7 hours of sleep. And I got up at like 8. So I slept for 5 hours and I'm all stressed. Next day, I'm all groggy. And it's like making those subtle decisions to where you know you have something important coming up, but you just fail to prioritize that by making these other silly decisions outside of it that wind up costing you. And at the time, you're like, it's because I had that assignment, when knowing damn well it was within your control.
It was within your control. It was. And you could have worked a little bit on that assignment and had it done and submitted before you left, right?
Dude, I was at track nationals from Tuesday to Sunday. And I had from Tuesday to Saturday to get it done.
Yeah.
In a hotel room where I was doing nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
And I saved it for that last day when it was due.
Yeah. And, it's, and we're sharing these stories to hopefully educate, the future generation or other people. But it's also one of those things where that was in college, right? So we can't be too hard on ourselves because, again, you're learning. You're a young person in college. You're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Your brain is still developing. And now you have that story to share and you have that experience. And yes, it was important. It was track nationals. It was this or that. And at the moment it was very important, but you can take that and, apply that in future to your job or to your whatever's, but yeah, it's definitely something you can plan for, right? If your teacher gives you an assignment, it's usually, especially if it's a big assignment, you usually have several days, if not several weeks to work on it. Doing a little bit each day, it's probably going to be the best course of action.
Yeah. All right. With like about 5 minutes on the clock left, what are some things in mind that you have that you think would help the most prevent self-sabotage? What are some things that you do that help you? Because to be honest, you're one of the most consistent performers that I've ever seen personally. Like, you perform at a high level in almost every race. Like, what are some things that you feel you do helps you set yourself up for success?
I think one of a couple things there. I've never been a huge workout warrior, right? I've never been I need to hit every pace. I need to hit every distance, volume, whatever. I've never, I train at a 7 and try to race at a 10. I'm lower mileage kind of person. And I don't have a ton of ego attached to how I perform in workouts. And if who beats me in a workout, I'm like, I'll joke around about it and I will notice things and I'll get a little, like, I used to get a little chippy back in the day, back when I can still like turn and burn. But, other than a few handful of times a year, I'm usually pretty chill. The other thing is, like, I will go on the conservative end, right? If I'm stressed for time or something, I'll do a fartlek. I'll do, a progression run, or I'll just do an easy run. I'll nope a run. I'll a lot of times what I had been doing prior to re-injuring my hamstring is I was actually just doing a midweek long run and a weekend tempo. I wasn't even doing a midweek workout yet because I wanted to just build consistency. So I was just doing a Wednesday easy run. So, keeping the efforts moderate, not crushing workouts on a weekly basis. And I'm not afraid to take a day off. I'm not afraid to take a day off here and there, especially like if we have something going on. Like, I took yesterday off from training because Calvin had his open house at his elementary school and we went to public market. We went to dinner afterwards. So I think those are probably the biggest things. Is I'm not too egotistical when it comes to my workout paces. And I'm not afraid to take a day off. What about you? Do you have any tips? Any final tips to avoid sinking your own boat?
For me is routine.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm a big creature of routine, especially day of race. Like my dad always makes fun of me saying like, bro, you have some of the most boring effing lifestyle I've ever seen. And it's like, yeah, I feel like a lot of it is out of necessity, especially on race day where I'm racing like a Brian Clay 10K at like, 10 p.m. It's like, well, what do you do that day? It's like, all right, so my normal routine is no alarm, like go to sleep, wake up whenever I wake up, and then I go to like IHOP is normally what I do. I eat a standard breakfast like pancakes, bacon, eggs, hash browns every single time. And then it's like lunch, Jersey Mike's or Subway. Nothing fancy because I know how those are going to affect me. And then a lot of it is I have particular playlists that I listen to. And this isn't stuff that like I don't get myself accustomed to. It's stuff like that playlist. I literally listen to the same exact songs going to workouts every single time so that every time those songs play, like my brain gets into the zone like, oh, when we hear this song, that means we're going to go to work. That's generally like the little things that I can control. Also on the day-to-day too, I always say, my whole thing is execution. So going into workouts, it's about what is needed of me that day. How can I get through this workout? Or how can I get through this run? What is the goal of it? And the whole concept of that is to drop your ego. Because it's like, yeah, I do on those 800s, me and Silas were talking about it. We're pouting a little bit because the last one we ran 205, but we're like, yeah, in a perfect world, we thought we should have broken 2 on that last one. And then we thought about it and we're like, what for? Like, what would breaking 2 get out of that? That's faster than my 1500 pace. Could I have done it? I think so. But like, what would we have gotten out of that? 205 was a great effort. I was pretty gassed at the end of it. So it's like, all right, what would we have gone off of breaking 2 from there? So keeping the main thing is what I like to call it. Making sure what is important to you is in line. So when it goes to things like, for example, over the last 3 weeks, I had weddings to go to. I went to a wedding the week of Brian Clay, literally like 4 days or 6 days before. And you get to that wedding and it's like, okay, now that's when you really got to start thinking about the things like keeping the main thing. So it's like, all right, so I'm at this wedding. I was pretty much invited because like I'd like to dance. My friend Kyle got married, so he was on my college team. Like, and I know that group is pretty outgoing. They're pretty rowdy in that sense. So for me, it's a matter of self-control. Okay, when it comes down to drinks, like you're not getting drunk tonight. So what do? I don't get a hotel in San Diego. I stay at my parents' house. So that means I have to go home that night. So you make a concerted effort. You can't drink because you have to drive home. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, I can't dance too much because I have to race. And me, I love to dance on the dance floor. So it's like, okay, that's when you start really consciously making those efforts and you start. And like you said, you do have to have fun. Like you do want to have fun. It's hard saying no to everything, but it's about making those concerted efforts and trying to keep your routine as alive as possible and trying to keep that main thing the main thing.
I like it. So if you had to summarize routine.
Yeah, I would say keep a routine and priorities in line.
Priorities. Yeah.
And if you have those 2 at the forefront of your mind, then that's your best case to set yourself up. If you don't normally go play basketball the day before conference, you probably shouldn't do that.
Probably shouldn't do that. No.
Yeah.
Keep the focus. And I think in thinking, listening to this conversation, reflecting, reflecting on if and it doesn't need to be this like, oh, I'm going to write in my journal. It can be that. It can be the notes section of your phone, but it can just be like an internal dialogue that you have on your next easy run. It could be a conversation with your friend on a long run, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, this like big, like serious reflection, right? It can just be a conversation with something. Find someone who you trust, who you know that you can run something by without them judging you, or someone who you trust, who you know is going to tell you the truth and is not going to just tell you what you want to hear, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, if I feel like you're very good about that, and
Try to be. I said I try to be.
and it's not, and it's like, it's not. And sometimes, you know, if people do get a little bit offended, or if they feel like they got their feelings hurt, it's because that person might be right. You know?
It hit home somehow.
It hit home. So like, I almost like when that happens to me and I feel a little triggered, it's because that person is right, and not necessarily that I disagree, or I probably, you know, maybe I disagree or agree, but it's like, if it hits home, it's probably because that person called you out on something. So
yeah,
you know. But yeah, reflect in some way, whether that's a conversation or some just internal dialogue. I think reflecting is important too. So, all right. So we are north of 1 hour and 10 minutes here. So I think that's a good episode. What do you think, Mark?
Yep. Let's call it.
Let's call it episode 11 in the books. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to us on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Podbean, everything. It's all there. But yeah, thanks for listening. See ya.